Conor McGregor, I think, maybe he's at a crossroads, maybe he's not. I mean, that's, I think, debatable. But this is an interesting moment. Is the Conor McGregor mystique gone? And here's what I mean. 2 of his last 3 fights in MMA, he's lost. 3 of his last 4, technically, if you count the pro boxing match. He did a lot of losing he's done inside combative sports recently. And more to the point, BC, I asked you a question, and you answered it, I think, correctly, which was, is this win for Poirier going to do what it did for Nate Diaz? Now, there are some differences there. Mm-hmm. That was shocking and really out of nowhere. Nate took the fight on last-minute notice. We all know the story. Plus, the Diaz brothers have this kind of cult following that I don't know if Poirier had exactly the same, and so he's a little bit harder to market.
And that was like a validation of the Diaz brothers sort of anti-establishment thing being, graduating.
Right. I mean, Conor McGregor took everything I worked for, and he was fighting with the UFC just prior to that, to the RDA fight. We've been over it when we did the retrospective on Conor's career. So for all those reasons, I think that's true. But there's another reason why I think it might be true, which is that, is it as big of a deal now to beat Conor McGregor? Not really. Not really.
Moving forward, now it won't be.
Certainly. Well, I mean, again, it's still going to do wonders for you. But the question for you is this, BC, is the mystique gone? What does it say that beating McGregor, while still impressive and uniquely important, no doubt about it, doesn't mean the same thing that it used to?
No, it doesn't. So look, in the aftermath of the fight, and obviously your analysis, your reaction to things can change. Shocked by that knockout. Not that it wasn't possible, but just, again, that moment of seeing McGregor down, you're now recalculating everything. And what I took in right afterwards on HQ on this set when we did the MK reaction show is, I thought McGregor got beat by a better guy. And that's still true. Let's not waste too much time talking about McGregor when this is Poirier's damn time.
Right.
He got beat by an all-time great guy who figured him out and came around after a slowish start. Look, McGregor won the first round. You go back and watch that fight. He had Poirier rocked at one point. In fact, Poirier in the post-fight press conference said, I was really one punch away from being stopped in that sequence. I was potentially. I was hurt, and maybe McGregor didn't realize it. So I thought, look, he's not as good as this version of Poirier, but could he go back to the drawing board and get consistent and take a bunch of fights in short time? There's still time. He's only 32. But Luke, we went back to your room, and this is not the plot line of an adult movie here. I'm not going down that road. I'm saying that we rewatched the fight. You rewatched it twice in a row while we were sitting there. And the more I rewatched Conor in there, the more I just had a different tune, Luke. Not over dramatizing this, not trying to give you some giant hot take here, but I think the sport has passed Conor McGregor by. It's
permanently or for right now?
Not permanently. He's still young enough at 32, and still has certainly a default level of hunger that again has defined him, right? I just don't think he has maybe the right amount of hunger to catch up to where he lost. The inactivity we found out in the end, if he was in there against somebody that would have gone down with those left hands, and by the way, a lot of fighters would have. A lot of elite fighters, I even think, would have. We may not have had this discussion because McGregor could have gone in there and had a little struggle, but then landed that left cross, and you're like, holy shit, he's still got the power. I still think he does have the power, but I think when you specifically go back and watch everything from the footwork to the mannerisms to really the remedial level in which he reacted to calf strikes, which, is something that wasn't as prevalent the last time this guy was consistently active. It feels like it has passed him by, and with the totality of the money he's earned and the fact that, Luke, it's hard to recreate that passion and intensity that you have on the original climb up the ladder. And as you and I talked about it, when he got to this point after beating Aldo, he leaped. He went from here to here, with the combination of becoming a 2-division champion, with the Mayweather fight, with the whiskey, with the throwing the thing through the window against Khabib. I mean, he got to a level that is just like off the damn charts. He doubled, tripled, quadrupled his, dynamic, marketable potential. I mean, he went all freaking in. I don't know if he can ever come back. And you can make the silk sheets, analogy, and you can do all that. But I don't know if he has the time, hunger, combination, focus to get himself back up there. Because, again, from the beginning, we were never really talking about a complete fighter. We were talking about a fighter who leaned into his strengths of striking and getting you out of there early. And I think that it might be too far. So that doesn't mean he can't win big fights. That doesn't mean he's not going to be
You still think he can win in the UFC?
He can win in the UFC. Depending on the matchup, he's just a powerful guy who goes after it. But I think you're going to see him in more competitive all-action fights, and I think he's going to lose against the super elite more often than not.
I mean, here's, I think, what's going to be, we don't know, but we're trying to give our take here and our guess. Here is one possibility I think worth taking seriously if you're a Conor McGregor fan, which is that to BC's point, whatever ability he's got right at this moment, it's still enough, I think, to beat some pretty good lightweights, maybe some welterweights, depending on the matchup or whatever the weight class is. Right? We saw him do it against, Cerrone not too long ago.
I mean, he's still going to hit you in the first round, right? He's still going to find your chin.
He's got big power, he's got good accuracy, all those kinds of things. So for that reason, he deserves to be taken seriously. It's not the issue. But here is one thing you really have to kind of just maybe internalize a little bit. One of the bad things that happened to Dustin Poirier in losing to Conor McGregor was how embarrassing it was and how thorough it was and how quick it was. But the good part about that was he was, 25, 26 years old? He had time to pick himself up, dust himself off, and have the commitment at age 25, still that burning passion to recommit himself to getting better at his craft. And by the way, it took a long time. Each one of those stages is developmental. You're never really done when you beat Diego Ferreira or Joe Duffy or on Jim Miller and on the list. He had to get better and better and better, which means he had to recommit and recommit and recommit. And doing that in your 20s when you still are burning with passion, to me is, I won't say easy, but that's the right time to do it. It's certainly the easiest time to do it. Can you do it at 32 after you're rich, famous, and you've already conquered 2 divisions before? Do you have it inside of you to recommit? Because he was talking about that leg kick from Poirier like he had never seen it in training. He had never felt it before.
Like as if he'd gone through this point of his MMA career and no one had hurt him that badly in the legs to where he didn't know how to adjust. It's like
it was sorcery.
Once in a while, you'll get an elite boxer who can go up through the ranks, be undefeated, win big fights, and then not actually get hurt. And then the first time you see him get hurt, they don't know how to clinch. They don't know how to do anything. He had that reaction to that. It was startling.
And you might be saying, oh, well, he could definitely commit to the rebuild. The rebuild is in some ways harder than the first build because you've already done so much. Do you have the fire and, frankly, the time to put in to get back the time you lost? We talk about it all the time, BC. If you're St. Pierre or you're John Jones, yeah, you can take a little bit of time off and come back and still be dominant, to a degree anyway, over your peers. But that is reserved for just the very, very, very all-time Mount Rushmore greats. If you're not that, and by the way, 99.9% of fighters, including Conor McGregor, are not that. If you take time away, man, there's going to be a bill to pay.
Yeah, and you may say we're being harsh to McGregor here, but we're comparing him to a level of eliteness that very few you can make that comparison. He's coming back talking a big game. He looked and said all the right things coming in. Right. I said heading into this, he's going to have no excuse.
He put everything he 155?
had. He put everything he had into it. But yet again, rewatch that fight a couple times. Everything he had, while yes, facing a true elite, an all-timer against Poirier, it looked like, and I think that's why the McGregor's mystique lower third is so apt. It looked like he was living off the legend. And there's a great line in the 90s movie Beautiful Girls when Matt Dillon looks at Michael Rappaport and he's like, be careful what you're saying. The legend will still kick your ass. And yes, the McGregor legend will still kick some ass, even up to and including the elite level. But he's still living on the legend. And I don't know, with some of his limitations that were foundational of not being a well-rounded fighter, if there's still time for him to get back up where he's legitimately competing with the pound-for-pound best in the sport and beating them. That window, I think, is closing or has closed.
Yeah, it's either closed or it's closing rapidly, and the time to fix that is not certainly on his side.
And you could say, oh, you guys talked a lot of shit coming in about how good McGregor was going to be. Again, we had a small sample size that we were trying to take all the facts that we had in the moment. And that small sample size is not going to carry you through the evolutions of this game. Again, it's not boxing with Mayweather coming back after a year and a half and the sport's still relatively the same. He's just got to be focused in and top shelf shape and ready. It's a little bit more than that.
And I want to make it clear. People are like, oh, well, if you can achieve the heights he did before, it can't be that hard to do it again. I would really caution folks against thinking that. Rebuilding is the hardest part. Ask Dustin Poirier, what was harder, to get to the Conor McGregor fight, the first one, or to get to the second one? And the second one, the rebuild, so that he could find himself back on top. Dude, look at what he had to do to get there. It was a climb of Herculean proportion.
Can we also high-five Poirier for how he came back from that Nurmagomedov loss? Again, that was his moment to build up 25 minutes to make all things right. This is my time. I've made the full turnaround. And then he dropped, I don't want to say laid an egg, but he got dominated by Nurmagomedov. So,
and by the way, if he still fought Nurmagomedov, he still would get dominated. There's no denying that. But
the point is that could have crushed him, and he could have easily said, you know what? I'm now just a veteran, also ran. I'm going to go back. I'm going to cash a few checks, but I'm going to get out of this sport. Instead, he went back to the drawing board and went and had the same hunger. And it's like, I love the band Pearl Jam. I know you do too, correct?
They're okay.
they've had an incredible career, meaning they've kind of stayed true to themselves but evolved in the right ways, and they're still an incredible live act. And, you know, all their albums, there's really no, like, shit stain. It's all pretty good. Yet at the same time, Luke, they will never, ever, 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 ever be able to write an album as good as 10. Because you cannot reproduce that passion that comes from, I have nothing, but I feel like there's something inside of me, and I'm going to fight until this art comes out of me and the people understand it, Luke. It's probably why nothing will ever be better than this show right now during this season of this show. So you better get geared up for the documentaries because we're capturing it in the moment. But Luke, the passion to share this art, as soon as my art's done, as soon as it's out of me
balls.
and the pictures
Dude,
have been
so overplayed, my God. Quit doing it. All right, with Conor McGregor's Mystique, we'll see what happens. Everyone I know is like, oh, you're selling him short, you know, blah, 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 blah. We'll see. If he goes up there and, you know, he was saying it's a level of inactivity. I do think the inactivity probably did not help. I certainly can understand that, conditioning-wise, and I think conditioning your body to take the kind of damage. But also, he just looked to be, by the fourth minute of the second round, he looked to be a step behind Poirier, and that happened really fast. He's got some work to do.
And you give him credit, by the way. I always give credit to Conor for how he loses, but he goes right to what was wrong. He's such a student of who he is and preparing for a game that he knows after a loss exactly what was wrong.
Which means it was in his mind ahead of time, too, by the way. It didn't just dawn on him at that moment. He probably had some fears about it.
But here's why we might be past a certain line, Luke, because it's one thing to know what you did wrong, like after the first Nate Diaz fight, and still have it in you to fix that. I don't know if he still has it in him to fix what's wrong. He can still diagnose it, but it may be too late, Luke.
We're going to have to see.
When the camera's rolling, I like the danger in it. The heart pounds. It defies logic. It's thrilling to me.